Hi, and you're listening to Milo Talks. I'm your traveling podcaster and your host, Milo. Join me as I share the commentary of my own thoughts along with the stories of my friends and even in some cases, random strangers that I meet along the way. And maybe, somewhere in all of these stories, we might just find out a little bit more about ourselves. I'm currently parked in my van just outside Leadville, Colorado, up in the mountains, and the temperature is about somewhere in the 60s. I'm actually wearing a sweater and a knit hat when I woke up this morning, and I put on my wool socks. I came out, I had made a cup of coffee, and I said hello to my neighbor who's also in a van, and she lives in it also full-time. She's from Salt Lake City. I asked if I could interview her for my podcast so I could get her story on how she ended up being full-time at 30 in a van with just her and her dog, Dakota. And this was our conversation. Okay, so I'm here with Jenny here in this beautiful, where are we?
We are near Turquoise Lake, which is outside of Leadville, Colorado.
And we met through a group page, Solo Female Travelers.
Solo Female VANLife, I think.
Oh, yeah. I didn't. Yeah. Like, there are so many.
There's a lot of them.
Now, you have been full-time in your van for 2 years?
Almost. It'll be 2 years at the end of the summer.
Okay.
Coming up quick.
And you entered into van life. This is one thing I've made you pause and not tell me till I had a microphone in your face. So now that you have that microphone, you can now tell me, how did you end up in a van full-time?
Okay. So I'm going to give a little backstory, I guess. So I'm 30 years old. I grew up in Michigan, and then I went to college there. I started dating a guy. We graduated, and he was in the military, so he got moved out to Utah. Now, I had never lived outside of Michigan, but I followed him out to Utah. I had been to Colorado a couple times and knew I needed to live in the mountains. So when he got stationed in Utah, that was perfect. That's what got me out there. We were young, and you date long enough, the next step is you get married. So we did, and that didn't work out for many reasons. So at 27, I found myself divorced and starting over. Now, we had a house and 2 dogs, but that was all we shared. So it was, as far as divorces go, I guess it was on the easier end of, we just split and went our separate ways, and we were still really young and had our whole lives ahead of us. And so I bought a little apartment. It was the first time I'd ever lived on my own, and really started over. I was a first grade teacher, and I spent that summer really figuring out me. Over a few years before, I had started camping, and I didn't grow up necessarily outdoorsy. That was something I discovered when I moved out to Utah as I started venturing into the mountains, but my ex-husband was not into the same hobbies that I was. So I spent a lot of time hiking by myself and camping with him, but it was never fun. So I was getting my toes into the camping world. I did a lot of trail running with my dog, but really starting to figure out the side of me that I had never tapped into before. And then I met a guy. I started dating, and right off the bat, it was one of the first dates I had gone on basically ever, because my husband and I had known each other forever. We never, I guess, really even dated. So I meet this guy, and he's good looking and outdoorsy and the same age, and he had just gotten divorced too. So we're very much in a similar area of our lives of kind of starting over, figuring out what dating looks like. And so right off the bat, some of our first dates are camping and biking, and we just dive right in, having all of the same hobbies.
Adventure dating.
And it was great. And it was like all of a sudden I had found a person that had all of those things in common with me, because my relationship before was not that way. And honestly, I thought I would end up marrying the guy. We dated for about 9 months. But before that, I guess it would have been, a few months in, we're camping constantly. That winter, there was hardly any snow. So every weekend we would drive down to the desert and camp. And we started getting these crazy ideas of like, do you think we could camp for 52 weekends straight? We'll tell our families we're not seeing anyone this year. We're going to see if we can camp every single weekend for a whole year. And so we start looking into like teardrop trailers, ways to make it a little more feasible than like sleeping in the back of the Subaru on an air mattress. And that's when we stumbled upon VANLife. And we're starting to look at these vans and we're starting to kind of think, maybe we could live in a van. Like we're doing this enough. We could definitely get into this.
Now, at this time, you had an apartment and he also had his own place, or were you guys living
owned a
together?
house.
Oh, he had a house. You have an apartment.
I have an apartment.
Every weekend you're in the wilderness.
Every weekend.
And you're like, how about we could just do a van?
Yeah.
Like, you were thinking, at that time, it was just for the weekends. You would share a van?
So it quickly escalated to, could we live in a van?
That's a big jump.
It was a big jump. Now, he was an engineer. So he is very like detail-oriented, thinking things through. He's over analytical in every way possible. So soon we have spreadsheets of these are the steps that we would need to take. This is the budget. Here's how we'd make this work. Here are the things we need to learn. We had plans. Like it escalated quickly to the point where we started telling our families, this is what we're going to do. We were going to move in with his parents and do our build. He started getting a realtor to put his house up for sale. So then we stopped camping and started working on house projects to put his house on the market.
Okay, to be clear, you are not engaged.
Not engaged.
Have you talked about marriage at this point?
No. I think because we were both freshly divorced, neither of us had marriage on the radar.
Yeah, who wants marriage when you can just have fun? So, but you were thinking at least 52 weeks into the future.
Oh, yeah. We were thinking we'll probably our plan was we'll get in the van for 2 years.
Wow. So you had future talk with this person
Lots.
Without actually having a commitment.
Yes.
I mean, that was the commitment. We're committing to be adventurous together in a van. And to give up, was he going to sell his house?
He was selling his house.
Wow.
Yep.
So I have to jump ahead a bit. Who bought the van? Like, how do you work out the finances?
So we didn't get there yet.
Oh, gosh. Here we go.
Okay.
Here we go.
So we got there in almost every other way. He started selling all of his belongings. So, like, his house was nearly empty. Like, his dresser was gone. He had his clothes in piles on the floor. He had no coffee table. He had sold, like, old bikes. And, like, he was clearing out all of his belongings. And that was the way he had been committing. I did not renew my lease on my apartment. So my apartment lease was going to be up at the end of April at this point. I think at this point it's probably February. And as a teacher, we start talking about, are you coming back for next year? You're on a contract. And so I had to let my principal know in a very teary conversation, because I did love my job, that I would not be returning the next year because I was going on this adventure. So I had committed in a lot of big ways at this point too. Well, the first week in April, we go on a spring break trip because I've got a week off of school to drive from Utah to Tennessee to visit his best friend. And we're excited because it's like pre-van life. We're in the Subaru, but like we have our 0-degree bags in the back and we're sleeping in like snowy parking lot in Nebraska. And so, we're super excited about it. We get out there, we're having a great trip, but at some point something felt off and I could feel it. Like I could feel the tension. And I kept asking him, like, are you okay? And he's, he was worried about getting in the van in a way that I think everybody is when they decide that they're going to make a radical life change, especially with another person.
Unconventional in so many ways.
Yeah, to the point where like none of those concerns weren't concerns that I didn't have. I was having my own anxiety over different things too, but it all felt very normal. And then we get in the car to start our 24-hour trek back. And I'm like, is everything okay? And he's like, no.
Oh, no. Okay.
I can't be with you. And I can't get in the van with you.
Those were his words?
Yeah.
I cannot be with you.
Well, that's what I remember. I think I blacked out.
I would have blacked. I do that too. I do that too. Like as soon as the shock hits, it's like when you hit cold water. The rest you start to go numb. You're like,
it's like I couldn't breathe. I just remember like trying to remember to breathe.
Oh no!
Because all of a sudden, like my brain is as much as I was like, wait, we're done. It was also like I don't have a place to live in 3 more weeks, and I have quit my job. And this was not a typical breakup. This was about like, I'm about to stop you in your tracks, and you may be homeless and out of a job because the plan we had together is about to go down the toilet. Please tell me he had a very valid and clear reason for ending this relationship. So this is where I struggle. So I did not grow up religious. My mom was raised Jewish. My dad was raised Catholic. I was raised kind of nowhere in the middle, trying to piece together like we celebrated Christmas, we celebrated Hanukkah in all unconventional ways, and that was my religious upbringing.
Okay.
So I also grew up in a house where you didn't have to have the same religious beliefs as somebody. That like more so it's about who you are as a person. Even today, my parents are divorced, my mom's remarried. Her and her husband have different religious beliefs and are very like supportive and understanding. And so I didn't grow up in a world where that was an issue.
I don't think I like where this is going. Go ahead.
So he told me he couldn't be with me because I don't have the same religious beliefs as him.
What was he a Christian?
He's a Christian,
a strong Southern, or like going to church on Sunday Christian.
He had never been to church in the 9 months we'd been together.
Okay.
Now he had told me, he was a self-proclaimed Jesus freak. Were his words when we had first met. He's like, I believe in Jesus, this and that. Again, great, cool. I can support you in that.
Yeah.
Not my same beliefs, but like you do you. Awesome. Yeah.
How nice. And first off, the fact that you were willing to meet him where he was authentically, and not try to talk him out of or change his belief or try to convert him.
Right.
Great. Good for you.
Yeah.
And had he ever, in all these times you were dating, ever tried to speak Christ into your life? Like, did he ever?
Really. We had a couple uncomfortable conversations kind of early on about like evolution. But I was like, well, this is difficult as a public school educator.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
To get behind. But again, it was like that. Religion played 0% into our relationship for 9 months.
So here you are, leaving Tennessee, and he says, you're not a believer. I was woken up in the night a few nights ago. God woke me up and told me this isn't my path and that I need to be following his word. Like this was such a 180 from like the cool dude that went snowboarding with me and backpacking with me every weekend to now like spewing out this like, because he had a vision or had a
religious awakening or something.
And
but again,
and here's the thing, there's no comeback for that. There's nothing there, because how do you go up against something that he is so strongly in a belief? Right. And so for days he had to have been sitting with this.
Yeah.
So he had this vision or this before you guys left for this trip?
No, it was during the trip, I guess. It was
during the trip. So that's so sometime in the trip, he had this dream, this revelation, and announces it to you on the 24-hour drive back.
The beginning of it, yeah.
So now, how did you make it?
So I cried a lot and was terrified. We made the trip in 2 days, so we got to sleep next to each other in the back of the Subaru in the freezing cold as I was watching my life fall apart and he was reading the Bible to himself.
Wow. I had to give him, I'm sure, to be fair, I'm sure he was struggling with the fact that he'd hurt you. That had to be real, right? He's sitting next to this person that he's devastated.
Right.
For the sake of his belief.
Right.
I cannot imagine what that felt like. I also cannot imagine being in a car with someone who this wasn't even just about a love thing. This was about your future.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So, oh gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
So there's a lot of complicated emotions going on at that point because it is my future. It's my relationship when I was very invested and committed to the point where like I quit my job.
Yes.
because I believed in this person and this dream.
So I'm a planner. So
I'm
okay.
I used to be way more type A than I am now, but yeah, I've got a to-do list in the van right now.
So when you're driving back, are you starting your planning right then and there? Like you are, you are thinking like, okay, what's the first thing I need to do?
Yes.
Which is, what did you do?
So I get back and I call my administrator and I'm like, hey, any chance you still have that job? And she's devastated.
They hired somebody.
Yeah, they've hired somebody. She's super on top of things. So she had an open position. She filled it right away. I contacted my apartment to see if I could extend my lease. Nope, they've already got a renter for as soon as I leave. But this is where it gets more complicated. So, I'm back and I'm in this crazy like free fall, and he starts to flip-flop.
No.
So
no.
He's like, I've made the worst decision of my life. I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know what's going on with me, all of this. And so at some point I kind of said, like, you don't have to get in the van. If it's the van thing that's scaring you, look, don't get in the van. But you've kind of messed up my life right now. So I need a place to live. What if I come and move in with you? Because I don't know where else to go.
In his house?
At your house.
Because he hasn't sold the house yet.
He hasn't sold his house yet. And it's not on the market. So I'm like, I need a place to live. What if you're really deciding that you've made the worst mistake of your life, like what if I move in and we see where this relationship thing goes?
Are you really wanting to get back together? Do you trust him at this point? Or are you just
I think at this point, I'm like just reaching for the nearest life flow. And this is like, and I didn't want to break up. Like I was devastated. So like all of a sudden when he's like, I'm so sorry, like this was such a mistake. Of course, I'm like, yeah, you idiot. This was a mistake. Like, what are you thinking?
Right.
So, my lease is over in, 2 more weeks. I get everything packed. I hire movers and I had to move midweek. That's when my lease was up. And he had flexibility with his job where he could have taken the day off, but he didn't. But then on top of that, he brought his mountain bike to work and went mountain biking after work. So I'm at his house with movers and all of my stuff. He hadn't really made any space for me. Something that should have been like an exciting, like, we're moving in together.
We're going to do this. We're going to make this work.
Yeah, was not. I had a really bad feeling about it.
I'm really not liking this story.
So I'm standing at his house waiting for him to get back, wondering what I should unpack and where. And he walks in the door and goes, I think we've made a mistake.
Give me his address. I am so up to here with this man. Don't ever tell me where he is or who he is ever.
Yeah,
I cannot tell you that. No.
It gets worse.
Oh,
I'm
no.
Sorry. And it's caused me a lot of emotional trauma and therapy sessions over the last
I'm glad that you mentioned therapy. Okay, because I'm going to need some after this conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. So your stuff's all at his house. He shows up after his bike ride and says, you know what, I don't know. I don't think this is going to work out.
Yeah.
And you go, do what?
So I move all of my stuff into his basement. And I set up my mattress on his floor. And I spent the next 2 weeks living in his basement because I had nowhere else to go.
And he knew that. So he was kind enough, let me get this straight, to let you move into the basement.
Yes.
But he didn't want to share life with you. He had flipped off. It was like, no.
He's off. At this point, I'm going off the deep end. Like there was one horrible night of me like begging him to like reconsider. Yeah. Which was a very low point in my life.
I can't even imagine. It's completely understandable.
Yeah. So I got really sad for 2 weeks. And then I said, I don't need you. I'm going to make myself feel better by letting other guys take me out to nice dinners.
Oh, wow. I was not prepared for that twist. Go ahead.
I don't know what my therapist would say about that decision. But at the time, that's what I did. So I decided to get on a dating app, and I meet this great guy, which ruined the plan. I wanted to meet a bunch of guys that would I would go out for one date and never want to see him again, just as a good distraction. But I meet this great guy. We have a lot in common. There's great chemistry.
Don't mind me. I'm in my basement of my ex-boyfriend's house.
Yes. And I break that right away. And he's like, I understand.
Wow.
I've been in weird situations too. It's fine. Great guy.
Okay.
So, and that's when I decided that I was not going to give up on this van dream, and I was going to go alone. And I had no idea how I was going to make it happen. But I just knew that he had already taken my life and threw a giant curveball that I wasn't also going to let him take the van from me.
Right.
I started looking for vans, and I found one really fast. And
okay, to be clear, because since so many people, all 13 of my listeners don't all know what the VANLife's about. You bought a shell of a van. You bought a Dodge.
Yes.
Is this a Dodge?
It's a Dodge Sprinter.
Okay.
It's
a cargo van.
It's a cargo van, and it's old life. It used to work at a business doing solar panel installs.
Great. Okay.
So I brought a friend who knows stuff about cars because I was like, I already love it. I could get there and it could not run, and I'll still buy it because I'm so invested in this dream. So we test drive it. It's perfect. I have it 3 days later.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And wow is sort of how I felt too.
From all of these conversations on these feeds that we were talking about in the very beginning, there's so many people who chime in. They want to know how we did it, how we got started, the cost.
Yeah.
And these are going up in price because it's becoming very popular. So I have to ask, what year is your van?
It's a 2006.
And you paid how much for it for the shell?
Yeah, I paid $13,500 for a shell with 155,000 miles on it, but it is a diesel engine.
Whoa, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the wow was I had it. I remember driving it. I was staying at a friend's in between, trying to not be at my ex-boyfriend's basement. She drove me to go pick it up, and I remember driving it away and just bawling my eyes out. And I got it back to her house, and it's in the driveway. And I remember being like, what have I done? I had a real solid plan to get it here, and now I have an empty van, a gigantic project that I'm underqualified to do. And I was so excited and so terrified out of my mind.
Desperate.
This was my getaway car.
Right. And you could take your stuff. So at this point, you can get out of your boyfriend's basement because you can have it, but then you have to do the build. So how do you live? Where did you do your build?
I have this empty shell. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah in the summer. Now it's
hot.
May. It's hot. It's too hot to live in an empty shell of a van, and I've got a giant dog that I have to care for. So I end up going on this date with this great guy to try and have this distraction. It's my last week of school. And he sends me flowers to school, which has never happened in my whole life. I've watched all my coworkers get flowers, and now it's my turn. And it was really sweet. It had this little card on it that said you're amazing, something. But
something, blah, blah, you're great. Flowers.
But I lived in my ex's basement at this time. And so I get back to the house before him. I put the flowers in the basement thinking he won't come downstairs. But I'm wrong. And eventually, I had gone to run errands or something. I come back and he's waiting for me at the door. Because all of a sudden, he's had this wild change of heart again, that he has, again, made the biggest mistake of his life, and that we need to be together. And going as far as I want us to get married, he had never said, I love you, and all of a sudden he loves me. Really couldn't flip-flop more. But at this point, I've met this other guy who's not crazy.
And brings you flowers.
And so I say, no, too bad, so sad.
Oh, you said no.
I said no. And so I started like trying to make arrangements to live other places because he would wake me up in the middle of the night crying, begging me to be with him.
In his house while you're in his basement.
In his basement where I have nowhere to go. I have no escape.
Nothing creepy about that.
No. So I end up doing stints of like house sitting for friends, bouncing between a friend's apartment. And while I'm at the apartment, now I have a van. So I'm like just researching build stuff because I can't build at her apartment, but I can learn about solar. I can learn about plumbing. I can order things on Amazon. I had friends that let me stay at their place. They had a huge garage that had space for me to build and tools to use. And
he knows you have a van. He has seen the van. He knows you're moving forward with the van. Okay.
Yep. He still doesn't want to be in the van, but he wants to be with me at this point, or so I think. So, I'm starting to make very slow progress on the van, which is killing me because this is my getaway car from this like disaster of a life that I've got left in Salt Lake City. But I can't leave until the van is done. And I just don't feel like I know enough. Luckily, I have great friends. We're just piecing things together because it's like I'd make a little progress and then the place I'm staying at, I have to leave and go stay somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And, you know, eventually I start to wear thin from the constant, I miss you. I've made a mistake. I want to be with you. I want to help you build your van. Come live with me. Come build your van here. Let's give this a shot. So eventually I cave.
Wait, he is trying to get you back. You've worn thin. Yeah. He wants to help you. And what?
So, you know, he's like, let's go camping, which is like what we built our relationship on.
Back to the foundation.
Yep. So, of course we do. And that's perfect. And just like it was before. And I was in emotional shambles.
Because you're a flower guy.
Yeah. At the same time. It was not a point in my life I'm proud of.
Sure, no.
Yeah. It was not a good person at this point. And I caved. And I was like, you know, this is what I wanted from the beginning, was to be with you. Sure. And so it was hard to turn that away, even despite all of the chaos I'd been through in the last few months. It was like, but this is what I want. And you're begging me to take this back. And so I did. And so I moved. I mean, I still had all of my stuff at his house, but
you moved upstairs?
I moved upstairs. Actually, for a while, I didn't. I stayed in the basement because I'm like, I don't trust you. Mm-hmm. We have to build this back. I will stay here. I will eat meals with you. We can work on van stuff and hang out, but I'm sleeping in the basement for a while. And then eventually we started to piece that relationship back together. He did help me build a lot of the van, giving me guidance. He had like a great garage with every tool you could possibly think of. So he worked full time and I, at this point, was unemployed.
Right.
So I spent every day from sun up to sundown working on the van. And then when he'd get home in the evening, he'd help me with the things I didn't know how to do. And it was a steep learning curve of trying to teach myself all of these things, but it was also the most empowering thing I've ever done.
Oh, I'm sure.
And we pieced this relationship back together somehow. We took little trips in the van together as we were building it. He still was not coming with me. So the plan was I was going to hit the road. He was going to meet me. We were going to do it long distance.
How long did it take you to build the... Once he was on board...
How
long did it take you?
It probably took me 3 months.
And you had the... So how long had you had the van as an empty shell to the point where it was finished? What was that time frame?
So I bought it in May and I hit the road in end of September.
Okay. That's a good chunk.
Yeah.
And part of it's because you didn't have a constant working space.
I had no space.
So here you are, you're taking trips together. Mm-hmm. It's your van. He's helped you with it. He still wants you in his life.
Yep. And then I hit the road and...
By yourself?
By myself.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm excited. And
you moved everything. Did you still have things at his house?
No. Well, not really. I had a storage unit that I had pretty much everything in. And as my like safety net, I really was like, I want to get every single thing moved out of his house before I leave, because there was a part of me that still didn't trust him.
Smart part.
So unfortunately, of the things that did get left there were like all the extra build materials. Like I had a bunch of electrical stuff, things that would have come in handy later on, but didn't ever get those back. But anyways, so I hit the road. He came to meet me 2 different times, and we had a great time, stayed in the van. Everything was awesome.
You're still a couple?
We're still a couple. Okay. Everything's going fairly well. We had the challenges of learning to trust long distance. But then we were getting closer to Thanksgiving, and I was planning to go back to Michigan, where my family is. And he had never met my family at this point. So I'm like, come spend Thanksgiving with my family. And he really dragged his feet on it, but eventually bought a flight and was going to meet me back there. And in the couple weeks leading up to it, the more I'm talking to him about just, what are you up to? He's like, oh, I met a guy I work with all of a sudden. I didn't realize, but he's a believer. And so we've been talking about, Jesus and God and all of this. And I'm like, the alarm bells are going off in my head, because since we had gotten back together, again, this wasn't really a thing anymore. And now it's coming back up. And so, eventually it ended again because we had different religious beliefs.
Did he go with you to your family?
He had bought trip insurance, which it should have been the first sign.
I may not make this trip.
So no, he didn't come back with me. And that was that.
Let's back this up a bit.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that on the tail of males, you had changed your world. It still got you here.
Yes.
And you couldn't be happier, I can tell.
Yes.
Yeah. And you're thankful, and you're stronger, and you're better for it.
Right.
But I think I hear that common, like, well, I went here because of this person I was with.
Yeah.
I changed this for this person. I'm not saying it's sexist. I'm not saying that other men don't do it for women. But when we change our lives for the other person to make that kind of commitment, even without a ring, it doesn't matter. You're altering your life.
Right.
And then to have it fall through. But I would say you are better for it, but you had a career and you had an apartment. You have, we are sitting on a cliff or a little overhang over like a river, and the wind's blowing and the rain may come and go, but we're just parked out here in in nature, right?
Yeah.
Where you were then and where you are right now, if you could snap your finger and you would get that life, which one would you choose?
Oh, I'd choose this one every time.
This one.
Yeah. And I often think, like, I wish I could have chosen this one without so much hurt and suffering.
But would you have gotten here? Do you think you would have found this without that craziness?
No. And that's, I think, what helps me sleep at night through all of the things I've been through, is that if it actually, I'm so thankful it went down the way it did, because I know that if he had backed out before I had quit my job,
you'd still be there,
ended my apartment, I wouldn't have taken that leap. But I took that huge leap of faith knowing I've got someone to do it with. And then when he backed out, I had this tipping point of I can get a new apartment and I can get another job. But I can't have my old life back. That's gone. My position's been filled. This apartment is no longer available. So
was that a consideration? Just go get another apartment and go apply for another teacher position?
Yeah.
Why did you not do that?
Because I was already, it wasn't the same. It wasn't going to be the same. If I could have had my job back, I probably would have stayed. But knowing that I'd be starting over with a lot with my job, that I'd have to move regardless, it was like, it was going to be a huge transition no matter what. And at that point, I would have rather transitioned to this. And even when it was going to be a joint effort, I had always thought, if I get in the van and I hate it, like, then I need to look for a job and find a place to live. And put my life back together.
You had options. It wasn't an end all. Your degree doesn't go away. Your teaching certificates don't go away.
Right.
Sure.
So, when we had thought this through, worst case scenario was we don't like it and we have to find new jobs and new places to live. So I was already at worst case scenario before I had
all by
even
yourself.
Bought the van.
Right.
So at that point, it was like, well, then why not? Like, I'm already at rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So I could buy this van and hate it. And then I'm still in the same position I'm in.
Now tell me what's next. So you have a job.
I have a job.
You are independent. You are capable and able to stand on your own.
Mm-hmm.
So what's next?
I don't know. And I've thought a lot about this. I have a blog. I keep an Instagram, and I love writing. So I've thought about this and written about this a few times because I feel like we're so often thinking, what's next? And I've spent so much time and energy and emotion on getting to the van and getting the van built and getting on the road and making that move to be insanely independent. And then it was like, okay, so now what? But I needed to just step back and enjoy that accomplishment and not chase the now what, but really
just enjoy the now.
Yeah. And be present in what I've accomplished for myself. And it's been a hard shift because I'm very goal oriented and driven. As a teacher, I used to do long distance triathlons. So I was constantly training for something with a plan and a goal. And then when I hit the road, I'm no longer a classroom teacher. I'm no longer a triathlete. So a lot of these
Your
things,
identity
a lot of
away.
These things that I had my identity so tightly wrapped around were gone. And I had to just become myself without the extra things that I kind of clung to make me, me. And so what's next for me is really dialed more into just being happy, making sure that I can sustain this lifestyle on the road,
right?
But sitting with who I am right now and just letting that be enough for now. And someday it might not be, and then I'll go from there. But for now, there's no next. There's just kind of living more in what feels right now.
Thanks for sharing how you ended up in your van.
Yeah, it's a wild story.
Everyone has questions like, well, are you safe? How do you feel safe? And, well, how do you know where to go? And where do you get this and this? And the world is out there. There are references and apps for us that help us navigate through this lifestyle. And there's also a network of van people who, this is how we met, actually care about each other.
Yes.
And say, hey, if you're not too weird.
Yeah, come stay with me. Once I make sure you're normal, you can be my neighbor.
You can be, park away for a minute, and then maybe I'll have you move closer.
Literally, exactly what happened.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You can find me at Facebook at Milo Talks, and also you can email me at milotalkstostrangers@gmail.com.